Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knowledge Panel, episode 19, and this is SEO for image search. Thank you very much for coming in. Another expert panel today, and delighted to have everybody here, especially because let me just stop the Facebook feed on my voice. Sorry about this. Hang on. Stop the Facebook feed on my voice. There we go. Right. Just for the recording, I'll just start that all over again. Hello, welcome to the Knowledge Panel, episode 19, and it's SEO for image search. Thank you very much for everybody for coming on. I've got an expert panel on again, brilliant panel, and what's good about this one is I have absolutely no skill set in image search, so thank goodness we've got a really good panel with us. Why don't I'll introduce everybody in a moment, but before I do, I'll just ask David to come in, my producer, and say hello and make sure I haven't missed anything out.
Hello. No, and great stuff on the repetition of the title there, although I shouldn't have said that because
now you've
I'm going to have to cut that out as well. Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go. Brilliant. Thanks very much for coming in, David, for producing everything, David. Let's jump in and see the panel. Olesia, tell us about yourself. Who are you and where do you come from? And remember, you're on mute. Okay, not anymore.
Not anymore. I'm based in Kiev, Ukraine, and I've lived most of my lifetime here. I'm an SEO entrepreneur and specialize in some technical stuff and including images. And I have a strong opinion that images can influence your rankings in a very positive or very negative way if you don't do them right.
And thanks very much for coming on. Karen, as well. I think you already know Olesia from previous lives. Is that right?
It was Roxanne that I know from previous.
Oh, right. Okay. So, Karen, who are you?
It's lovely to meet Olesia.
Okay.
So my name's Karen. I'm a wedding photographer. I've got an established wedding photography business, and I specialize in doing SEO with other photographers and with image-heavy sites. So that's my kind of. I've got coming at this from an angle of ranking kind of sites where really my clients don't want to put words on.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming in. And Roxana, tell us about yourself and where do you come from?
Hello, everybody. I'm Roxana Stingu. I head SEO and search at Alamy, a stock photography website with the most diverse collection you're ever going to find. And I've been lucky enough to partner up with Google on a few initiatives on image search. So hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you a bit about that.
Excellent. And where are you at the moment?
So I live near London now. I got lucky enough to get out of London in time, but I'm Romanian and have been in London for 8 years now.
I'm glad that we haven't kicked everybody out because it's not been the greatest year for a few years for me as a Brit. I've not felt the proudest man in the world really, but there we go. So good, excellent. Right, let's jump in. And before we dive into image search and all the ins and outs, if people haven't got time to be here for the whole 45 minutes, maybe could you just come up with one tip that you think people should take away with them, and one idea that you think is a good one. Karen, why don't you go first?
So I think there's a whole bunch of things that you could do, but narrowing it down to just one idea. I know we're going to be talking about sitemaps in a bit, so I think how you deal with sitemaps is really, really important. So definitely have that on your list. But I think really the main takeaway other than that for me would be really kind of building context around photos and building in the context around the narrative. So having text near photos that kind of gives a bit more of a backstory to the alt text. So the alt text obviously should be describing the photo, but having links between that and the text can have a really kind of impactful difference to how a page performs in search. And also to photos getting shown in the search results as well.
Okay, I might come back and dig into that a little bit later if we've got time, but I know we've got a lot to pack in. So, Roxana, any one takeaway for people? I know it's early.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a technical SEO tip. So whenever using images on your website, if you're worried about speed in any way, code your images in a responsive way. So that's by using the picture element, where you can provide different image sizes based on your user's devices. So you don't have to load this big quality image for every single user, but then you can still serve that to search engines because they will love it. The bigger the image, the better it would be.
Brilliant. That's a really useful tip, actually. Although it means I've now got to put everything into lots and lots of different sizes. But that's the life of a lazy guy. Olesia, what's your tip?
My tip is treat your image as if it was text. So don't think it is something distracted or just an illustration. Make sure it is relevant. Make sure you translate it into text and embed it into your text content correctly. And this way you can achieve really good results. Like, it's kind of in short.
That's brilliant as well. I might dig into that pretty quickly as well. So just if anybody is watching live or listening live on Facebook or on YouTube, if you want to join in, ask questions, they should pop up on the screen. Fortunately, that's David can send them out there, and we'll try and integrate them into the show. And if you aren't watching live and you'd like to be live next time round, if you go to Inlinks and look up the knowledge panel on the Inlinks blog, you'll find the link to a page that will let you get notified when the next live shows are on. And also with that, Inlinks as well are the sponsors. So thanks very much for Inlinks for sponsoring the whole show. And that's enough of Inlinks for now. And we'll just dive into to really my one question, which I guess you guys have already given me three good benefits, really. But I always thought of images as yes, I know that they can speed up. If you don't put them up right, they're slow. But I was kind of sitting there thinking, right, okay, they've got to be reasonably fast. And if I've got some out text, that covers the text problem. And that's it. What's the benefits of having spending time optimizing the images? How do you start getting? How does that start translating into money? I don't know who wants to take that one first. Karen?
The best, well, really the benefit is that the search results can be visual. So if you've got photos that rank for a range of terms that maybe match search intent, they maybe match different points in that buyer journey, then the search results are more likely to include images. And don't know if you think back to some recent searches you've done, you'll see that there's maybe videos that sometimes show, there's photos that sometimes show. So having your photos showing those results is a really nice kind of visual way of a potential client being able to get a visual kind of reinforcement that you're going to be the right fit for them, because depends on what they're looking for.
But does that not mean that the image then has to? You talked about the narrative, for example. So doesn't that image then have to have some kind of call to action in it to get the user into your ecosystem? Because one of the problems with images is that somebody looks at the image, they've got whatever they needed, unless they wanted to steal the image. We can talk about copyright a little later. But how do we then translate that into the user journey? How do we get the user into the user journey?
Well, ideally, when they look at the image and maybe see something they like, certainly for photography services, if they're looking for a service, it's going to be something they connect with. I think the situation would maybe be different, whether it's a product and then there's some buyer intent, or maybe you're looking for a stock image. So if I was looking for a stock image for something, but then when I clicked on the image, I seen that it linked to the site where I could buy more stock images, then that's a great kind of visual representation that this site has what I need, and I'm not going to have to trawl through loads of searches when I'm there, for example. But with photography services, seeing something visual and then clicking on it, ideally that photo should redirect or kind of link to the page that's going to then either answer their questions. So that's why the optimization is so important, and the narrative around it is so important, because if they get on there and the context is wrong and it's not a fit for what they've searched for, they're going to leave.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And Alicia, you had you were going through before we started on the show. I saw you put a GIF up and you started messing around with optimizing an image of me, probably because I was very unoptimized. What were you trying to show there?
I was trying to see why that particular image of yours was ranking, it was like showing up in your knowledge panel. So when I search for Dixon Jones, and you have lots of images, and this one is not that not the best quality, and it's not the best size, and it's not very present on your website and not very present everywhere, but somehow it is in your knowledge panel. So I decided to understand why it is there and what happened. And it appeared that you are using it in HTML, not in schema. I've seen the question about schema markup, but you're using it in HTML of your website as a logo. And
that's okay. That's interesting because I have got a link to an image in the schema, but it may not be the same one. I can't remember.
It's not the same one, yeah. And
okay.
that's that case when Google ignores schema and picks up HTML content. HTML content generally has much more influence compared to metadata, and they picked that one. So I started to playing around with that to see how, because Google has introduced Lens, Google Lens into search. Now you cannot use reverse image search as you could before. You are searching with Lens now. And they do that because they want to show matches, so matching images, so that you can look for your product. And they are introducing this MUM model into search when you are combining image results, video results with text, and you are easier to find something. So yes.
Google Lens. Sorry, Google Lens is So I hadn't really played with Google Lens, but you showed it, and it looked like my image had very few lookalikes.
With Google Lens, it's very hard to see. It's much easier to do with Google Vision API, but what is not very comfortable is that Google Vision API returns different entities compared to Google Reverse Search. So I tried to take your image and put it on my website 13 hours ago and associate it with some other entity and maybe a bit use yourself. So if you look into the tweet of mine with GIF of yours, there was now this entity. Let me look. It had different entity than now, and I've added lifetime achievement award to your entity, and now you have this entity in image reverse search. If you look, and that.
So what we'll do, guys, is we'll put a link to either a screenshot or the GIF in the show on at the inlinks.net/p/knowledge panel, I think it is, and going from there. Yeah, and now I've got a new entity, a new description on the image. So it's amazing what you can do, and it's amazing what you can do even when you're not directly connected to the image as well. So
yes, you can do that from any website actually with the same image. Just upscale it a bit, make it better quality, and optimize it and embed it into the text. So don't use it like something staying beside the text. Use it inside your text, embed it correctly, make it part of your content.
So Roxana, I've not let you in yet. If there were whole things you wanted to come in with, then feel free. If you had a tangible benefit for image search, for example.
Yeah, Google did a big survey a while back, and I think it was about 3 years now, and they discovered that 50% of online shoppers have used images in their purchasing journey, and that was 2019. Imagine what percentage that is nowadays, especially with people using mobile more and more, and it just makes it easier to use things like lens and reverse image search and things like that. So if your users are using images to kind of decide on the products they want to buy, then your products better show up in image search.
So can I then, while I'm with you, Roxana, come back to you talked about responsive as what your one tip, right? So what that potentially does mean is that you're going to need to create lots of different versions of your image in different sizes and stuff. Something I use for that is an online tool called Snappa, SNAPPA. I don't know if you've got any easy tips for changing image sizes and conveniently putting into the most obvious sizes for most screens. You got any tools that you like?
There's definitely a lot of different tools that can be used for doing that. One that I wanted to mention is Cloudflare, for instance, because a lot of people use Cloudflare as their CDN. They also provide this tool that you can use to create all the image sizes you need, and also image formats, and just create that on the fly. You don't even have to pay for extra storage or anything. So you pretty much pay for one image, and then you create all the sizes and all the different formats through the CDN without paying anything extra, without needing any extra storage or anything else. So then you just use that on your website.
So is there a downside to using a CDN though? Because then all the images are hosted on the CDN. And if to Karen's point earlier on, kind of if you've got links on there, or people are linking through to the image, they then pick up things that are not on your website. And if I want to get to my website, is that a double-edged sword? Is what I'm saying. Is a CDN hosting the images on a CDN giving you potential links to Cloudflare instead of your website, or do you think that's a overstated problem?
To put this in a bit of context that maybe is more familiar to people, think of images in the same way you do with videos. You don't worry if your video is hosted elsewhere and you just embed it on your page. And it's the same with images, because it's not the image that actually ranks, it's the page that embeds that image. So it doesn't matter if you host the image on Cloudflare, it's on a separate domain than yours, as long as you use that image on your own website and you put your own text around it so you can rank for that image.
Awesome. That's a really useful tip, actually. Yeah, go on. Sorry,
and you can also use metadata in your image. So if someone copies that, or if someone uses for themselves, Google knows who the source is because it's in the metadata of your image. You put creator, you put source, you put copyright there, and thus you are protected against image being not attributed to you, actually.
So important. I think, following on from what Olesia said there, the fact that Google is beta testing, showing the licensing of images. So if your image is copyrighted, or you want to link to maybe your usage page of what your terms and conditions are for any usage, you can do all that in the metadata. So that's something that can be done in bulk as well. So it can be really efficient to do, to just apply to all of your images before they're added to your website. So it's not something that should even be kind of a lot of admin. It can be a really kind of fast and efficient thing to do once it's set up. And I think it's so important. So totally agree with that.
So a newbie question then.
That image of yours, Dixon, which we were talking about earlier, which I've taken, I've already copyrighted it with myself, so it now belongs to me. And
this is what happens. I'm not saying that Ukraine has a different way of doing things, but
you can check it out right now. I cannot share screen, but it's there.
So here's the thing. I mean, if we're going to copyright, well, I was going to ask how do you go about copywriting? Then newbie question is, how do you go about copywriting? And then I guess I'll go back to Olesia and say, so why does Google, is Google going to pay attention to the fact that you've just copyrighted an image of mine? But Karen, how do you go about copywriting an image? Do you watermark it? I mean, what do you do?
Well, there's different approaches. I think if you want to let Google know that it's copyrighted, then not putting your kind of copyright logo on the photo, because Google's not really going to see that. It might, but it would be in the metadata. So each photo has like a kind of EXIF data attached to it, and that's something that Google can read. So having the copyright information in there means that Google will know that. And at the moment it's still in beta testing, but it can show the licensing. So having all that information filled out means that Google is able to kind of communicate that to whoever's looking at it. Personally, I tend to put my logo on the photos as well, but
Okay, that bulk copywriting, is that part of Google's beta, or is that a tool?
No, there's a variety of different tools out there because I mainly work with photographers and they all typically have Adobe anyway.
Right.
Then I would usually use Adobe Lightroom for the kind of bulk editing of metadata and adding copyright and geotagging. We've not got to geotagging yet, but that's a kind of potentially very, very useful thing as well. So that's the software I would use. I have done work with other agencies who've had different software that they've used for that process, but it's not my kind of day-to-day. So.
Okay, I'm very aware that I'm leaving Roxana out of this, so sorry about that. I just wanted to go back to Olesia and say, well, no, Roxana, let me ask you.
I can actually help bring
yeah.
in some more information here. So for anybody who doesn't know what Karen is talking about, just search for IPTC metadata. That's the information that gets associated with your image. It's embedded in your image, and it carries all these different fields anywhere your image goes. And Google has started reading these fields, or some of them, and adding that information into the search results. So if you go on image search now, you pick an image, you click on it, you get that side panel that gives you extra details. If you look under that image, you can find more information, such as who the creator of the image is, who the copywriter holder is. But you can also find a new tag, just like you're used to the product tag, but it looks like a small image in a corner, and that's the licensable image tag. So it tells you that image can be licensed. So when you click to see the details of the image, it tells you who the licensor is, so who has the licensing rights, and it links to a page where you can read about that. But it also tells you where you can go and buy it, which is not necessarily the same website all the time. And this information can come from IPTC, but it can also come through structured data. So there are fields that Google has adopted in partnership with schema.org that Google now recognizes to allow these extra details under the image to be populated for certain types of images.
I'm so glad Roxana mentioned that, because one of the questions I'm often asked by people who maybe they've got a website that's full of photos and they've already, maybe got 100 blog posts and there are loads of photos on there. What they don't want to do is re-upload all those photos with new, fresh, updated metadata on them. And the approach I would take was what Roxana mentioned then, which would be using the schema instead. So if you're kind of already in a situation where you're like listening to this and thinking, okay, I've got a lot of work to redo, don't panic. Adding the schema is just an alternative way of getting that information in there.
But one tip, if I upload my photo on different websites and I want my copyright information to be the same, then I would use IPTC, because anybody downloads that image, uses it elsewhere. When that image ranks on their website, it will still show my licensing information. But if it's only for my own website, I would use structured data because it's easier to implement than having to go to all these images and update their IPTC metadata.
Okay. So, Olesia, when you're taking something and then putting it as your own copyright, I mean, there's two questions there with that. Obviously, one is, I assume you'll not recommend that everybody does that as a general.
I don't
rule,
do that either.
Oh, you can't do that either.
Just for a test.
Yeah. So why does Google allow that, or is it because you've changed the image a little bit, so therefore it becomes a different image, and then Google doesn't know that it's the same image? What exactly did you do to make Google think that image had you as the originator?
I actually made it just a better quality than the one on your website. I upscaled it a bit and made it a better size, because the one you use, like Google recommends using special sizes in their documentation, and yours is rather small. It is not in line with the Google recommendations. So I upscaled it just a bit, still not too much, so that I would not be too hard.
Oh no, I don't mind, Olesia. It doesn't matter. I'll just report you to Google afterwards. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. It's,
so Google liked that, and I mentioned you, and I embedded the image correctly. So that's not, I just put it somewhere in the space and it started like ranking and showing that information. I used lots of stuff around that image. I used text, I used entities, I used metadata, I used structured data and everything for that. So
I think that's a perfect example, because I work in stock photography, and you see SEOs always say, don't use stock photos because you're not going to rank well. That's a perfect example where you can use the same photo on 20 different sites. It really differs in how you use it. Because if your context that you put around that photo is more relevant, you're going to do better than 10 websites before you that have used that photo. It's not about the photo itself, it's about how you use that image, and what context you're using it in, how you're optimizing it, if it's better quality than somebody else's, if it's, you know, a size that Google prefers in Google Discover, for instance, versus any other surfaces. It doesn't matter if it's the same one photo, if you do it better than somebody else.
Because Google likes when it's interactive content and images, but like somewhat interactive. So, and if it's relevant, you can easily rank a web page with that photo, and it doesn't matter if it's unique or not.
Totally agree.
Go on, Karen.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point, because there is this kind of concern about stock photos from, you know, some of the kind of agencies I work with, and it's just not true at all. It's all about the context and the actual page and the relevance and all these types of things. So to anyone listening, please don't be put off from using stock photos, because it's just, as Roxana says, using them properly, really.
I guess that's just like using words in the English language. Just because somebody else used a word doesn't stop you from using the word in your text as well. You know, it's just which words you put in which order turn it into a story, really.
I mean, Olesia's tip was use images as if they're text. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and what you did, Olesia, I think, is you changed you created an associative entity of lifetime achievement on that image, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In text, so, I didn't embed it into metadata structured. I could embed it into structured data. I don't remember, because I've done images for all of you, Roxana, Karen, but all in different ways. And yours
I'm gonna Google myself now.
Did I get a lifetime achievement award as well? I'd like.
No,
yeah, I bet I don't rank for that.
I made it in 3 different ways to see what I can get in 24 hours, but I actually had 13 or 10, so it didn't get everything around. So not so much time passed, and it is like very hard to index everything quickly in Google, but I managed to. Anyways, yours one was the easiest because you had that poor quality of your image on your own website. So
for sure.
So
I'm easy.
that was the like no-brainer.
I can't believe I haven't Googled myself on image search before. You'd think I would do that like a first thing in the morning. I just realized my name is associated with technical SEO as one of the entities. I'm happy. I am very happy. Thank you, Google.
And
I can see Karen doing it now.
Karen is wedding photographer. Like Google recognizes Karen in all the ways around that.
And all of this is coming from the text that embeds these images, because I never saved an image in my life with my name and technical SEO next to it in any way. So it wouldn't come from the file name. It wouldn't come from the alt text or anything. It's just the context that Google is finding these images is relevant for that.
So basically, Google is reading the words above and below the image or around the image in the actual text and associating that with the context of that image. So it's still about, you know, the relationship between an image and text on the page, and that's really where you're saying the narrative needs to connect properly. Is that right?
Also, the title and the intent of that can really help make a difference as well. So it's like everything really.
So I noticed in it's for video search, but the Yoast plugin, for example, on video search, it puts in the same description as the page description. Do you think that's I mean, it's obviously convenient to do, but do you think that's a sensible thing? Would you assume that Google is going to take the description of the page and associate that with the meaning in the image? Is that a logical thought process?
I guess like everything in SEO, it depends. Um,
I was trying to avoid saying the
Yeah,
you-
because
you're trying to
pet
avoid
head.
it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. If the page description is already a summary of the video, then I can see how it can be used as a description for the video. But I guess it really depends where this text is being taken from and if it's relevant.
Yeah. Okay. So,
And sorry, it might be
probably using a caption underneath the image is probably a better way to do it. Really.
yes, absolutely. And you should do it not just for search engines. You should just do it for accessibility reasons. You should do it for your users. It's just all around good practice to put a caption to your images.
So ever since I was, knee high to a grasshopper doing SEO, which is a long time ago for me now, everybody said, "Oh, you got to put alt text on every single image." What do you think's better, alt text or a caption? Anyone?
Both.
both. They've got different. Yeah, totally agree. Both.
Why?
Alt text is more about describing the image and kind of giving it context, assuming that you couldn't see the image. Whereas I think the caption should be more written for someone who's viewing the photo and able to view the photo. So although there's maybe a bit of a crossover, there is a difference.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's my take on that anyway.
I'll try to give an example. If you have a technical document and you have some graph describing something, the alt text would be very descriptive of that graph. It would be like bar chart showing this and this and that. But then the caption for that would not need to be that descriptive in that sense. So it could just be results of experiment 2. That's referenced somewhere in the text.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise you end up with an overlap with the text that's maybe building the narrative around the photo. So there is a delicate balance, I think, between those 3 different levels and how they fit together. Ultimately, I think user experience has to be the priority because that's what Google's prioritizing anyway. So I think if you're writing captions and you're thinking, okay, this is too similar to what's on the page, then your caption needs to be different.
Yeah, and obviously the user experience depends on whether you're blind or not as well, because alt text suddenly becomes much more important. Sorry, Alicia, you wanted to jump in there.
I just want to say that if you take away alternative text, you might be not able to rank the image at all. Whereas if you don't use captions, like, it doesn't matter that much. So that alt is ultimately very, very important. Just many people don't do it right. For example, it should be unique. Your alternative text should be unique for the whole page where it is embed, and it should be like keywords or entities should be used when you are describing an image, and it should be super relevant, and it should be part of the text. So when you embed the image into your text, it is part of the sentence. Continue your sentence where you put it, and you'll see the effect and benefit of that.
Okay, there's a lot of tips coming out here, and some of them are really useful. I'm going to have to watch back my own podcast, I think, today, and pick some of these up, because there's a lot of stuff I need to do with images, and all I need to do is get somebody else to do it for me. So I might be asking one of you to hire one of you soon after this. Let's talk about just quickly about file types in images. Back in the day, it was GIF and JPEG and then PNG. But last time I was on and talked about images, or was with the group talking about images, they were talking about other formats. What are your favorite formats for images?
I think for image heavy sites, I always recommend showing in WebP as an option, because it can make a little bit of a difference with the speed. Then it's not supported by all browsers.
Shown in, could you say that again? Sorry.
So I'd recommend WebP.
WebP,
as an option, because it's not supported by all browsers consistently at the moment. But having that as an option on there is going to help from a performance point of view. Okay.
Well, everyone agree with that? If you had the preference.
There's new formats coming out. Like there's one called AVIF, AVIF. I haven't had a chance to play around with it, so I can't tell you how good it is, but it's supposed to be a bit better than WebP, and WebP was already supposed to be better than JPEG. So we're looking at massive reductions here in size while keeping quality, which is every person's dream when we work with images. As Karen said, WebP is not yet compatible with every single browser. I think it's been adopted by like 95% of the web traffic, but that depends how that translates to your website. So if you're still getting users that come through Opera, let's say, heavily for some reason, then maybe it's not for you. But it could be that on your website you get 99% compatibility and you don't care. You can use WebP exclusively without a fallback to JPEG. And then with this new format, AVF, last time I checked, it was only compatible to 70% of web traffic. So that's quite low, considering some websites might go down to 30-40% that.
Okay.
So maybe not yet. That's why I haven't invested any time in testing it and playing around with it yet. But definitely something that I have on my list for this year.
And presumably, even if it is, you know, compatible on Chromes and Safaris and, you know, the obvious ones of Firefoxes, it's only after a certain version of Firefox and Chrome. So some people will be using older versions of those. So there is always a lag, even if the major search engines suddenly jump on. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this website called Can I Use? I think .org or .com, one of the two, and you can connect your Google Analytics, and it will check based on browsers used by your users. Will tell you what percentage of your traffic would benefit from any kind of browser feature, and it will also check compatibility with WebP, AVF, and other stuff like that, including if you can do responsive images or not.
All right. Okay. Cool.
And also, like Roxana mentioned, you can always do a fallback. And I've also met some instances when WebP was actually heavier and a bit worse than JPG. So for some websites, maybe there's really no problem about using JPG unless they optimize it in a certain way.
Amazing. Let's go back to we're already nearly at the end of we're crashing through this. There's an amazing amount of tips and things coming on here. Let's go back to sitemaps, if I may, image sitemaps. How important are they? Are they always important? What do you do differently, Karen, between an image-heavy website and a site where you've got very few pages, but the images are really important, for example?
Well, with image-heavy websites, it's actually really important that you don't index the sitemap and that those sitemaps are not included. Because the thing is, Google will find the photos on the posts and pages that those photos are embedded in, as long as they're embedded properly, as Olesia says, they will find them there. If you supply Google with, I'm thinking the average established photographer out there is going to have thousands of photos. So you take 5,000-10,000 photos. Each of those photos has its own page. The quickest thing you're going to end up with is not good index, good rankings. It's going to be a Panda penalty. So having a whole load of pages without any context or text or words around them, it's going to cause a problem pretty quickly. And I come across this all the time, and people saying, nobody's finding me online. I'm like, well, Google can't find any information. So I think if your site is really small and maybe you don't have that many photos, then you could take the approach of actually optimizing those pages. But even still, there's very few situations I see where you wouldn't just be better no indexing the whole lot and having great kind of context around the photos to explain, what they're about and why they're there.
Okay, so you're not a fan of image sitemaps, is what you?
No, wait, because that's what I thought as well. And I was here like, wait, what? Because I have like 40,000 sitemaps for my whole website. I'm not giving them up. I see what you're saying. You're saying if you have 10,000 pages where you just have the picture and that's about it, don't index those, because that's just going to bring a big chunk of low quality pages because there's nothing else but the image. So don't just put those in image sitemaps. Exactly. But if you have a page with proper context and an image, of course, put that in your image sitemap.
Absolutely.
Oh, right. Okay. So you're putting the proper pages that you want people to look at into the image sitemaps, not just the image URLs themselves.
Because I think the problem is when you have a photography website, you upload all your images on the site and you put them in carousels and things, but most CMSs will create a page where you just have one image. So for each image you upload, you have an empty page with one image.
Yep, which
And
is
those
not
end
where
up in sitemaps automatically, and you don't want that.
Exactly. So this is the thing. It depends on I suppose, the CMS you're using and the website itself. But absolutely, you don't want that, because if that is indexed, what happens is when somebody clicks on that image, they just see that image. There's no menu, there's no context, and it's just a dead end. It might be a
you were
really
asking Dixon a call to action on the image. There's nothing.
Yeah. So from that point of view, certainly, I think if in different websites, there's different situations in terms of what can be indexed, as Roxana said. So I think it's very much comes down to the CMS you're using, and almost it's one of those, it depends again, because it does depend on how the website's been set up and how those images are. So it'd be great to see how that works for you, Roxana, with the area that you specialize in.
Well, we create the page dynamically, so every image gets all this plethora of metadata that's associated with it. So we don't really create empty pages, that's for sure. But in terms of having a massive website with a lot of pages, and those pages having images and wanting to do image sitemaps as well to kind of help image search a bit more, I do recommend it. I'd say even though Google tells you do the 50,000 URL limit, don't. It's too much. Very large sitemaps don't get crawled completely. They get problems. If Google finds too many issues in the sitemap in terms of maybe deleted pages or redirects, it might give up before it even goes to the end of it. So I'd recommend, and if you've seen Oliver H.G. Manson's latest post, he goes with 10,000 per sitemap, and that seems to be a decent number instead of going to 50,000. So I'd recommend smaller sitemaps in that case. Not just images, everything, sitemap.
Yeah.
Okay. And also some people are forced. So there are some image optimizers that are using JavaScript to for uploading images onto the website. So actually Google doesn't see them when they first crawl it. And one of the ways if you cannot refrain from using JavaScript for loading your images, you can give them in a sitemap so Google knows they are there.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is something that's really relevant for photography websites. I know we've got lots of listeners for lots of different websites, but I think especially if the text is kind of like JavaScript heavy, image galleries are just really not ideal. Finding maybe portfolio pages that might be a secondary page that's not necessarily going to rank, but I tend to recommend sticking to kind of HTML based imagery.
Yeah, but sometimes you just cannot do anything with that, so you have to walk around.
So I've got a lot of users or a lot of customers and a lot of listeners that use WordPress, because who doesn't? Have you got a favorite tool for making the images work on WordPress, or would you these days go to Cloudflare and do everything through Cloudflare? It's kind of my last question, really.
Okay, I'll jump in. I don't work with WordPress as much anymore, but back in the day, I'm not a fan of installing all these plugins that do all these things for you, because they do slow down the whole setup. So I would try to optimize images before I even upload them to WordPress. So
totally
any
agree.
external service, if possible.
Totally agree. I think that's how I was thinking about that then, because really the more you can do, especially with geotagging, because you can there's tools to kind of do things like that afterwards, but really getting all the information on beforehand, which I know we've not mentioned geotagging much yet, but that is another kind of really good quick win for kind of local area-based businesses that are offering services in different areas, adding a geotag.
Well, let's fit it in then. So just because it is a big one for certain types of businesses. So where does geotagging turn into pounds and pence for web owners?
I think showing relevance. So if your business is in a certain area or has provided work or services in a certain area, adding geotag coordinates that match with either the area you're talking about on the page. So for example, at a wedding venue, if you've got photos from a certain from a wedding and maybe part of it's at one venue, part of it's at another venue, then it's going to help having the right photos shown in the search results. if you've got the kind of geotag coordinates matching up with different locations in there.
What an amazing session. There's so much stuff in there. I'm blown away. I think I might have to transcribe the whole of this text as well to put onto the blog post when we put the whole thing up, because there's so many different tips in there that we can use. Thank you very much, everyone. Before we ask you to say, how do people find you and find out more about you guys, David, maybe you can just jump in and say what's happening next.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, just echo your thoughts there, Dixon. Amazing session today. So many tips that were shared as part of today's session. Thank you, all the panelists. We were talking a little bit about user experience as part of today's session. The next session will be on Monday, the 21st of February, 3 p.m., 4 p.m. GMT, and that'll be episode 20 of the Knowledge Panel, and we'll actually be focusing in on user experience there. So how does your user experience impact SEO? Already we've got Helen Benavides from GIFGAF booked for that one, and we'll have a couple more panelists as well. Just sign up at theknowledgepanelshow.com to be alerted when we go live for that one.
Guys, again, thank you ever so much. If people want to get hold of you, if you want to sell your wares or whatever, please, here's your opportunity. How do they get hold of you? Olesia, bear in mind they can't see the screen, so don't say, if you're going to say something, that they've got to spell.
Instead of talking about myself, I'd like to add about WordPress. When you are choosing this plugin about images to optimize them, most of the plugins, they require fine-tuning, so settings, and many of them do make your images invisible to Google because they are starting to upload with JavaScript or anything like that. So be very careful when you are choosing one of those, and be careful to look into settings and make them good for you. Because I've seen lots of people suffering actually from utilizing this or that plugin ineffectively. So just be sure that you don't break things up when you're using anything for your optimization. Don't rely on the plugins too much. Better hire a good developer, even if it's WordPress. So
which leads you into how do they find you?
Okay, you can find me in Twitter, in Facebook, in Google, just Olesia Korobka and anything.
So for those that can't see this, it's Olesia is spelled Olesia, and Korobka is spelled Korobka. That's my point. Roxana, how do they find you?
I'm on Women in Tech SEO on Slack, so reach out if you're part of the community. Say hi. I'm on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Just look for my name, Roxana Stingu.
Brilliant. And Karen, how do people find you?
So I'm over at Photo SEO Lab, which is just photoseolab.com. And I'm also on Twitter, and I'm in the Women in Tech SEO community as well. So feel free to get in touch over in Slack if you're part of that community.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys, for coming on. If anybody hasn't tried InLinks, that was the ad for it, and that's all we got for this show. Please come along to the next shows. And again, Olesia, Roxana, Karen, thank you for coming on to the Knowledge Panel.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.